And my doc kit's there in case that's the only one we actually.
Good morning. The committee will come to order. The committee is meeting today to receive testimony on how the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan can benefit the United States insular areas. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or their designees. This will allow us to hear from our witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedules. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today or at the close of the hearing, whichever comes first. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without objection, the chair may also declare a recess subject to the call of the chair. Without objection, the member from the United States Virgin Islands, Representative Plaskett, is authorized to join the committee and to question the witnesses in today's hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. As described in the notice, statements, documents, or motions must be submitted to the electronic repository at HNRC DOCS hrncdocs@mail.house.gov. Additionally, please note that as with in-person meetings, members are responsible for their own microphones. As with our in-person meetings, members can be muted by staff only to avoid inadvertent background noise. Finally, members or witnesses experiencing technical problems should inform the committee staff immediately. So it is minutes past midnight here in the Marianas. So good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking our witnesses, welcoming Marianas Governor Torres. Governor, welcome. And the governors from our other U.S. insular areas. Thank you all for joining us today for this oversight hearing on President Biden's Build Back Better plan. That plan is still under construction, which is why I'm holding today's hearing. We know the plan will include a giant infrastructure package. We also know how easy it can be for the needs of the insular areas to be overlooked when major legislation like this is enacted. Just look at how we were left out of Obamacare. But our track record improved considerably with enactment this month of the American Rescue Plan. All of our areas receiving substantial assistance. So let us build on that momentum. Let us build the case for the infrastructure we need in the insular areas. I hope today's hearing will also make the case for a bipartisan approach to build back better. We have governors of both parties who may not always agree on policy. But one area I think we will all agree is that the quality of life for our people and the economic success of our islands is closely tied to having first-rate infrastructure. We want you, governors, to have this opportunity to inform Congress and the administration of the infrastructure and other needs in each of your jurisdictions that you want included in the Build Back Better plan. You have direct on-the-ground managerial understanding of the needs of your islands, and we need to hear your ideas. Of course, we all know the broad outlines of what is needed. Just for the Marianas, as an example, our only hospital in the Marianas is almost 40 years old and in need of modernization. We need modern health clinics on the islands of Rota and Tinian. The families cannot drink the water that comes out of the tap. We're pumping treated sewage into the same water we fish in and offer to tourists for vacations. And our electrical systems are old, expensive, and fossil fuel based. And when typhoons strike, exposed power lines and wooden poles are ripped down by the winds. Our Public Utility Corporation estimates modernization will cost over $800 million. I understand, a daunting sum. So we need to hear your vision today, governors, and in the coming weeks for what your most important needs are. And you, of course, need a commitment of funding from the Biden administration and from this Congress so our areas of America can have an American quality of infrastructure. Lastly, I think we all need to make a commitment, the federal government and the insular governments, to build back better to standards that are sustainable and environmentally sound. Because no areas know better than our insular areas that the climate is changing and our islands will be dealing with repeated and powerful typhoons and hurricanes and cyclones sea level rise, and the deterioration of the coral reefs that protect our shores. We're going to have to design and build with that new reality in mind. And hopefully, by doing so, we will save the repeated cost of billions of dollars of disaster recovery. Congress has had to provide, and we will also be sparing the individuals and families and communities we represent with some of the trauma and painfully long periods of recovery that we're even now experiencing. So again, I know you are all grateful for the much needed financial relief Congress and the President and President Biden have provided in the American Rescue Plan. Governor Torres, you have already announced that you'll be using the money to put further workers back on salary. And the Biden administration has also approved several Mariana CDA grant applications that the previous administration sat on. The Biden administration also announced Monday that you are getting the waiver of local match for lost wages assistance, Governor Torres, another of your requests that the previous administration ignored. But despite all of this good news and work, it's just begun. Now's the time to do that better. I now turn to our ranking member for her opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman Sablan, for the opportunity. And I thank you, all the governors that are here this morning for this important hearing. And it's great to see you all. Today, the committee is holding a hearing on the Build Back Better plan, President Biden proposals for infrastructure and economic development package, and its potential impact for the U.S. territories and, of course, our economies as well. Despite some serious flaws, the Build Back Better plan calls for investment for the nation's roads, bridges, our ports, and our transportation systems, our water and wastewater treatment plants, as well for providing universal broadband access to every American. And
I, I, I think I think Jennifer may be having some problems, connectivity problems. Can staff please help her? Jennifer, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think you're having some problems and we're not reaching you. So, staff,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can.
Okay.
Could you go back to like 4 minutes and 30 seconds where you were earlier? Almost not at the very beginning, but almost at the beginning. Sorry.
I was just saying, Chairman, that although despite some flaws of this plan, this President Biden's plan includes some wastewater proposals, building roads, building bridges, transportation system, among many others that includes broadband access to the territories, and all those pieces should be included for the territories as well. And we need to ensure that the territories are included in any bipartisan initiatives in Congress, and considering modernizing and strengthening our United States infrastructure. In that sense, Puerto Rico, as you mentioned, Northern Marianas, we need to revitalize and upgrade our infrastructure to modern standards. That's urgent, particularly after the 2017 hurricanes and last year's earthquakes. In fact, the 2019 American Society of Civil Engineers gave Puerto Rico infrastructure an overall grade of D. And found that the island will need to increase investment by 1.3 to 2.3 billion annually in order to support economic growth and competitive and be assertive. I know the rest of the territories face similar infrastructure challenges, and that our shared vulnerability to natural disasters and extreme weather events requires that we make investment to increase resiliency. In that sense, the Build Back Better plan also calls for upgrades to the nation's electrical grid system and for clean energy investments. This will be particularly relevant in the case of Puerto Rico and territories, given our over-reliance on foreign petroleum imports to meet energy demands. As I have stated before, it's crucial that we help territories to diversify their energy sources in order to address high electricity costs that hamper economic growth. we must increase of use or use of renewables, and I have introduced legislation like the Offshore Wind for Territories Act to achieve this. Puerto Rico has also published 1.5 billion RFP for renewables and storage. However, I also support an all of the above energy approach, and I am a strong proponent of upgrading the existing plants to liquefied natural gas, which is cleaner and more reliable. Reliability is a key issue for Puerto Rico, especially to support and expand our pharmaceutical and manufacturing industries. And speaking of those industries, I know that the Build Back Better plan has also calls for strengthening American manufacturing and to bring back critical supply chains to the country. And this is an area that we have bipartisan agreement, and we should accomplish that. The COVID pandemic 19 has shown dangers of our over reliance on countries like China and for our medical and pharmaceutical products. Jurisdiction like Puerto Rico can play a leading role in the nation's efforts to secure the national supply chains. And currently, 12 of the top 20 pharmaceuticals and biotechnology companies in the world have manufacturing operations in Puerto Rico. We have the capacity, we have the labor experience and infrastructure to become a national hub for the production of medical equipment and medicines. And we have introduced legislation to support this through federal tax and incentives to encourage manufacturing companies to relocate in the United States, particularly to economically distressed zones across the country, including Puerto Rico and the rest of the territories. Lastly, I want to know that during the last presidential campaign, President Biden also released a plan with a series of policies proposals for Puerto Rico. In addition to highlighting the need to rebuild the island infrastructure, his proposals call for more equitable treatment under federal health programs like Medicare and Medicaid, nutritional assistance under SNAP, and access to SSI. So if we are truly serious about helping Puerto Rico and the rest of the territories, we must address unequal treatment we receive under many federal programs. As Puerto Rico only representative and ranking member for Insular Affairs, I'm committed to ensuring the territories are included on equal footing with the states or on any infrastructure and economic development plan that we may consider. And it's my hope that we can work in a bipartisan way manner to achieve this. And I look forward to hearing our governors about the infrastructure of the territories, economic needs, and how Congress can be of any assistance. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Congresswoman Gonzalez Colon. I would like to now introduce our witnesses. The Honorable Pedro R. Pierluisi, the Governor of Puerto Rico, a former member, a former colleague, a former member of this committee, and actually my classmate, the class of 2008. Governor, welcome. The Honorable Lou Leon Guerrero. Thank you. Governor of Guam. There's an echo somewhere. Somebody can, unless you're asked to speak, can you turn off your microphone, please? Okay, great. No, we still have that echo. The Honorable Ralph Leon Guerrero Torres, Governor of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Governor, welcome. The Honorable Albert Bryan Jr., Governor of the United States Virgin Islands. Governor Bryan, welcome as well. And the Honorable Lemanu Lepoe Mauga, I hope I got that correct, Governor of American Samoa. Aloha and welcome as well. Let me remind the witness that under our committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but that their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. Yeah, can staff turn off that mic, please? So when you begin, the timer will begin and it will turn orange when you have 1 minute remaining. I recommend that members of witnesses joining remotely use stage view so they can pin the timer on their screen. After your testimony is complete, please remember to mute yourself to avoid any inadvertent background noise like we just had. I will also allow the entire panel to testify before questioning the witnesses. And now the chair now recognizes the Honorable Pedro Pierluisi. As a former member, he gets to go first. Governor Pierluisi, please, you have 5 minutes.
Acting Chairman Grijalva, Acting Ranking Member Gonzalez, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My constituents, the 3.1 million American citizens in Puerto Rico, have endured multiple natural disasters, a governance disruption, and the struggles related to the COVID-19 pandemic. All of these factors have added to an already complex environment, including the creation and operation of the Financial Oversight Management Board to improve Puerto Rico's fiscal situation and restructure its public debt. Even with the significant disruptions caused by all these events, we have made considerable progress. On the debt restructuring front, Puerto Rico has successfully restructured the financial obligations of several of its instrumentalities, and the Oversight Board recently put forth a plan of adjustment to restructure the largest portion of our government's bonded debt, which my administration supports, except for the proposed cuts to public pensions. Ending the bankruptcy process will allow the island to set our path forward to progress. Our government has met important milestones towards fiscal responsibility, including a significant reduction of expenses, increased cash balances, a pay-go system to honor pension obligations, agency consolidations, and increased transparency on the use of public funds. All that work has been done while still reeling from the hurricanes, earthquakes, a global pandemic, and a bureaucratic maze to access federal funding. But there is new hope. The Biden administration has pledged assistance in Puerto Rico's reconstruction, economic development initiatives, support for families, relief from unsustainable debt, and expansion of education and workforce development. Moreover, my administration has worked closely with the White House and federal agencies to ensure that the funding is actually accessed by Puerto Rico on an expedited basis. A cornerstone of President Biden's economic plan is an infrastructure package to rebuild our nation. Since Puerto Rico's infrastructure has endured years of limited investment, we need to work together with Congress and the administration to ensure that Puerto Rico's critical infrastructure, including our electric grid and power generation structure, is rebuilt in ways that increase our capacity and resiliency to withstand any future disasters. I would like to thank the members of Congress who advocated for the enactment of the American Rescue Plan. The plan includes provisions that will significantly benefit Puerto Rico, such as our full inclusion in the Child Tax Credit Program and considerable funding for our local Earned Income Tax Credit Program. In addition, the Biden-Harris administration has pledged support to improve access to affordable, quality health care. Without permanent federal funding of Puerto Rico's Medicaid program, we will not be able to provide adequate health care to our citizens falling below the federal poverty level. I look forward to working with Congress to meet the healthcare needs of vulnerable U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico. Furthermore, I join the members of this committee who have called for the U.S. Department of Justice to stop defending the disparate treatment that the American citizens of Puerto Rico received in the Supplemental Security Income Program, as well as other federal programs. In his Build Back Better plan, President Biden recognized that to assure Puerto Rico's future, we must reduce our unsustainable debt burden. Promesa aimed to address this crisis, but when it was enacted, no one envisioned two devastating hurricanes, earthquakes, and a once-in-a-century pandemic. In light of these current conditions and the advances in fiscal responsibility and management improvements still underway, the Oversight Board needs a meaningful shift in approach. Significant headcount reductions, severe funding cuts, and budgetary constraints have delayed reform implementations and added unnecessary bureaucracy. The Oversight Board should concentrate on assisting the government on the adoption of accounting best practices, fiscal responsibility measures, and increased transparency. while respecting the authority of Puerto Rico's elected leaders to govern and establish public policy. However, moving forward is not possible without addressing the issue of Puerto Rico's political status. Even if we were given state-like treatment in all federal programs, it would still fall short. The American citizens of Puerto Rico deserve equal political rights as well, representation in Congress, and the right to vote for our president and vice president. This past November 3rd, a clear majority of Puerto Rico's voters declared in no uncertain terms that they want equality and no longer consent to being second-class citizens. To ignore the plebiscite results is undemocratic and un-American. This is not the time for Congress to impose on Puerto Rico a convoluted status resolution process. I respect those who advocate for other status options, but the Puerto Rican people made a clear choice, expressing that statehood is their preferred path forward. So it is Congress's responsibility to respond to that vote. For those of us who believe in equality, we cannot consent to discrimination and unequal treatment. It is up to Congress now to show the world that the democratic principle of equality professed by our nation applies to all American citizens. Puerto Ricans have earned it, and we will fight for it until we achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor Pierluisi. Now that our former colleague has said his statement, the gentle lady from Guam, will, of course, is recognized for 5 minutes. Governor Guerrero, please.
Half a day, Chairman Grijalva, Vice Chairman Sablan, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the Biden-Harris administration's Build Back Better plan. First, I congratulate and thank both President Biden and Congress for their swift action to enact the American Rescue Plan. Like so many communities across the nation, working families in Guam have been hit hard by the economic devastation left by the COVID-19 pandemic. With its focus on vaccinations, equity, support for working families, aid to struggling small businesses, and measures to curb poverty, particularly with respect to children, the American Rescue Plan has laid the foundation to not only help communities recover, but also to come back stronger than before. Furthermore, the planned infrastructure legislation would be an essential next step in advancing this goal. We are especially encouraged by the Biden administration's approach to infrastructure that incorporates confronting the challenge of climate change and the principles of environmental justice. This policy aligns with Guam's economic recovery efforts, which builds upon the control of COVID-19 and extensive vaccinations. Guam has moved aggressively to diversify our economy to be stronger and more sustainable. We have launched the Guam Green Growth Initiative to create a truly sustainable community. We embarked on the Zero Waste Program to convert waste into resources and clean circular economy using glass and plastic road construction. Seeing the opportunity for new private sector
The Western is best, but I don't think that's gonna happen. We'll see how it goes.
reasons of food security and economic.
I don't need notes to him. I'm telling him, her.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm here, yes.
Yes, my governor's having a difficult time.
I understand that. So somebody's mic is on. All members, please mute the mic, mute themselves. Does that resolve the problem? I would think so. Governor Guerrero, you have an additional 30 seconds. Please continue.
We embarked on the Zero Waste Program to convert waste into resources to fuel a green circular economy using crushed glass and plastics in road construction, opening the opportunity for new private sector jobs. For reasons of food security and economic growth, we are also expanding investment in agriculture and aquaculture. In line with the Biden administration's goals to bring back manufacturing jobs to American shores, we are working to create an IT Silicon Village for high-tech jobs. Taking advantage of our close proximity to Asia and demonstrated investor interest, we are aggressively moving forward to establish pharmaceutical and solar panel assembly operations in Guam. To support these recovery and sustainable efforts, the availability of additional federal resources could not be more fortuitous or indeed necessary. There are, though, some further measures that I would respectfully request Congress to consider. In building upon the American Rescue Plan, one good starting point would be the draft Insular Areas Climate Change Act. In particular, Guam fully supports the proposed increase of the local match waivers for federal grants, in addition to the complete elimination of local match for disaster assistance program. Additionally, we request the allocation of federal highway funding for Guam and the other territories be re-examined. The nominal dollar amount of federal highway funding that Guam annually receives has remained the same for the last 20 years. Guam's only public hospital needs rebuilding. Its main hospital wings were built in 1978. The anticipated investments in public infrastructure in the Building Back Better plan will provide additional funding for the new hospital's construction. This investment will ensure that Guam has a safe and modern facility that serves the needs of each person that walks through its doors. In its facilities condition assessment in 2020, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimated the cost of constructing a new hospital to be at least $743 million. I intend to set aside at least $300 million from the American Rescue Plan. Additionally, investments in another issue of equity is the current policy that makes American citizens in Guam and fellow citizens residing in most of Guam's sister territories ineligible for SSI for persons with disabilities. This has given rise to disparate and unequal application of this program. In conclusion, we share President Biden's vision to rebuild communities across the country with infrastructure that creates a foundation for economic growth and equity for the disadvantaged, combats climate change, supports environmental justice, helps lift families out of poverty, and improves the lives of all working people. Sidzu Usmasi.
Thank you very much, Governor Guerrero, for your testimony. And of course, now I will recognize my governor, Governor Rafi Guerrero Torres, for his 5 minutes of testimony. Governor, please.
Honorable Chairman Grijalva, Vice Chairman Garcia, and Chairman Congressman Kilili, members of the House Committee on Natural Resources, thank you for inviting my testimony on behalf of the people of the CNMI on President Biden's Build Back Better initiative. I will highlight some of the key points we submitted written testimony. In 1986, our new Commonwealth government found itself confronted with the challenge of modernizing an over 50-year-old pre-World War II infrastructure, road and water system, unreliable power generation, a hospital facility in deplorable condition, environmentally hazardous wastewater and solid waste dump condition, and ports that require significant upgrading were at the top of the list. While substantial progress has been made, we have struggled to secure funding resources necessary to address the breadth of our infrastructure needs. Crucial infrastructure systems on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota are critically outdated, at capacity, or in need of substantial maintenance. Dedicating funding resources for infrastructure is critical, but is not only the step needed. This committee is familiar with the CNMI struggle to support the demands of our economy with the present workforce. A lack of construction workers has proved a significant barrier to advancing our community. As the nation works to build back better, we must address the unique capacity and infrastructure challenges of the U.S. territories and realize a solution that provides immediate and long-lasting relief. With only 2,800 individuals currently employed in construction, our ability to address essential development is severely limited. One project alone, the Air Force Tinian Divert Airfield, may require as many as 2,099 construction workers. That's 75% of our total construction workforce. These increased demands have rapidly driven up and will continue to drive up costs associated with construction, reducing the efficacy of federal infrastructure dollars. Between 2019 and 2020, wages associated with construction occupation increased by 26.3%, far in excess of federal minimum wage standards and in line with prevailing wages across occupation, clearly a result of the shortage of labor available. I ask that this effort consider both our needs for greater level of investment and the means by which we can adequately utilize this investment to break ground and complete projects. In 2020, Congress approved 3,000 CW1 visa work for foreign workers engaged in construction connected to recovery efforts from declared disasters. I will submit that the state of Sinamai's infrastructure constitute an emergency and that this apportionment be applied to permit the 3,000 CW visa allotment to all construction activities to support public and private investment throughout the Sinamai. In the spirit of fulfilling Section 701 of the Covenant, the federal government provided CIP funds to support the goal of modern infrastructure. This program aided the Commonwealth in phenomenal advancement, but the structure of the program has not kept pace with the increased cost of infrastructure. The CIP fund has been locked at $27 million since the program incepted in 1978. We urge the review of an increase in the budget amount to adjust the inflationary costs and current infrastructure needs. Access to capital markets to provide financing to support large-scale investment is critically important. A just CIP allotment can provide adequate security for public debt that can support rapid advancement for our infrastructure. The people of the Sinamai are deserving of a modern, sustainable infrastructure that supports economic development, a better quality of life, and a healthy environment. The Build Back Better initiative is an opportunity to address many of the long-standing concerns of the Sinamai that are specific to our ability to better manage our economic development and make real investment in the infrastructure of the Sinamai and the life of its people. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Build Back Better infrastructure initiative. Congressman Kilili, I personally want to thank you for all the hard work you have put in bringing funds that we need here in the Sinamai. And I am in full support of this landmark initiative, and I look forward working with you and the administration of President Biden to see its full implementation. Again, undang tu nasusumasi para todo lajudumo.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, Governor Torres. I just realized that actually we could have joined together for this. I know you're just 3-4 miles up the hill, and we should have come together with that close, but maybe at a future hearing. Thank you very much, Governor Torres. Let me go back to my panelists. I think the next governor is the governor of American Samoa, Governor. Let me see, Governor Malga, please. You have 5 minutes, sir. Good morning.
Honorable Chairman Cavallo, Vice Chairman Saplan, and distinguished members of the full Committee on Insular Affairs. Talofa and good morning from American Samoa. I'm humbled by the opportunity you have given me to share with you how U.S. territories like American Samoa can benefit from the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan. We must acknowledge the help and support of the honorable members of this committee through congressional legislation, Department of the Interior, and its Office of Insular Affairs. We thank you for your commitment to the insular areas in the full committee, as well as other subcommittees in providing guidance in the areas of ocean fisheries, national parks, and the Land and Water Conservation Fund, oversight and commitment to indigenous people. We thank you for your efforts to equity and justice for the insular areas. We also want to thank our Congresswoman, Uifatali Muamata Weatherwagen, for her work in the committee, not only for our territory, but our territories within the purview of the Insular Affairs Committee. I don't see my time on the screen, but While there are common interests and benefit among U.S. territories, I must acknowledge that American Samoa also has its unique needs and challenges. American Samoa is home to the only COVID-19 free U.S. territory, with over 32% of its residents who have received full vaccination to date. 47% of those that receive also just the first shot and not second shot. Our swift and aggressive response since late 2019 to the measles outbreak into the Pacific region led into our direct transition to a declared state of public emergency against the pandemic in early 2020. Our borders remains closed since March of 2020 to prevent the possibility of such deadly virus from entering our island. Meanwhile, the American Samoa government works simultaneously with limited resource to build quarantine facilities and to retrofit its one and only hospital in preparation for COVID-19. In 2 months since taking office in January 2021, we have successfully completed 2 repatriation flights from residents from the U.S. mainland. We knew the risk and financial demands of such lengthy operations, but reuniting families and loved ones after a year was critical to the mental health and well-being of our people. During the course of 1 year since our borders closed, we had 16 suicide cases among all our youth and the highest suicide rate ever in a single year. Domestic violence began to increase concurrently around the time when our local education system underwent adjustments to remote and virtual learning. I share these key unforeseen circumstances to the health and social distress of the pandemic on our shores, regardless of the fact that we remain COVID-19 free today. For a territory that is geographically isolated and over 2,000 miles away from the nearest state, closing our borders was a huge risk to our fragile economy. Nevertheless, we fear losing people's lives as we carefully monitor the coronavirus across the globe. The alarming rate of COVID-19 death around the world meant that it will possibly wipe out our local population and significantly impact our way of life within a short period of time. Biden administration Build Back Better plan, as we have learned, has healthcare as a top priority, along with infrastructure goals for our security now and moving forward. We have made healthcare as one of our top priorities. Medicaid is vital to our healthcare system. Medicaid is the only health insurance plan that is available to the Medicaid-eligible resident of American Samoa. Nevertheless, residents who do not have access to private healthcare is subsidized by local government. We have submitted a full report to the committee, and the full report will also cover global warming, economic buildup, critical infrastructures, road, bridge, hospitals, and schools. Global warming affects sea level rises, coral reef, and natural disaster as well, erosion in the ocean, as well as inland. Transportation is one of our key infrastructure build-up that we want to bring up to the attention of the committee because our islands are connected by airplanes and sea transport. In closing, U.S. territories like American Samoa could benefit greatly from the Build Back Better plan in many aspects, specifically in addressing our healthcare and economic development needs to building sustainable and resilient infrastructures to minimize the devastating impact of climate change in our community. Faftai Taylor for the opportunity to speak before you all today, and I yield my time to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for that statement. Chairman Grijalva and Ranking Member Westerman have joined us. I would just like to ask them for their patience, and they would make their
Virgin
opening
Islands.
statements right after the Governor Bryan of the Virgin Islands were to speak. So, Governor Bryan, please, you are recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Westerman, Vice Chairman Sablan, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss ways in which President Biden's Build Back Better plan can benefit the U.S. Virgin Islands and its 105,000 American citizens. With your help, we look forward to building a resilient, sustainable economy, and we look forward to welcome you for a visit when conditions permit. Virgin Islanders know a great deal about building back. We have been doing it for a very long time. We suffered devastating losses as far back as 1989 with Hurricane Hugo, Maryland in 95, where 90% of the structures on St. Croix and 80% of the homes on St. Thomas caused over more than $1 billion in losses. After Maryland, employment in our tourism sector did not return to pre-hurricane levels for 6 years. In 2012, our largest private sector employer, the Hovensa Refinery, closed, drawing more than 2,000 employees and 10% of our employment in St. Croix unemployed, undermined every aspect of our economy. It took years, but we identified a new owner, and today, starting 2021, we are back in business, starting refinery operation. In 2017, we suffered 2 devastating Cat 5 hurricanes, which did damage to homes, infrastructure, and our industry. All our major hotels closed for long periods of time, and some have not even opened yet. With the diminishing ability of our hotels, our tourism dollars are impacted. Both our hospitals were severely damaged and still not up to par today. 8 of our schools were so badly damaged, they were condemned. Our power distribution grid has been rebuilt 3 times in the last 30 years, and still we're struggling. Homes and roofs, over 800 left to repair still, and $7.5 billion in damages. With the help of Congress and FEMA, we've begun to recover, but there's been so many delays. In 2020, just when we were returning to our pre-hurricane, COVID hit, which devastated our cruise ship industry, and we have experienced about $198 million in losses, about 17% of our annual budget. The funds that we got through the American Rescue Plan will go a long way towards helping our territory recover, as well as it is to all of our sister territories. But a major continuing problem is our financial inability to maintain our roadways, our power plants, and all the infrastructure, to train our workforce, and to constantly adapt to these ever-changing threats. Securing our infrastructure money under building the Build Back Better plan will be crucial for the territories in order for us to be able to build back. But we hope that the Biden administration will continue to support us and help us develop comprehensive plans that address resilience. As I've demonstrated, we have had a lot of pressure over the last 4 years, but mainly the biggest help and hindrance has been the federal government. Restrictions between FEMA and HUD have created impossible hurdles to rebuilding. They simply have to understand that we cannot wait 10 years to build back. We suffer from disasters all too often. This body passed the Bipartisan Budget Act to help us rebuild our residences and our infrastructure to 100%. But still, we quibble over FEMA, over simple dollars and cents, which would be what that would be in another state. We all are familiar with Puerto Rico and their struggles of our sister islands financially, and it's easy to see how us other territories could fall into the same fate. It does not bode well in this age of equality that Black and Brown people suffer from the same ailments of our counterparts in inner cities of America. How could it be that we suffer from the same health disparities, education disparities, income disparities? A quick fix to help us with our financial obligation would be for this body to authorize territories to back the full debt of the territories. This would give us an ability to borrow money at the 1% that is being issued today, and would free up millions of dollars of capital that we now pay in interest. As we continue to get back to where we were last year, a budding and rising economy, we have seen tremendous impacts in our marine sector, being able to attract and keep charter vessels and the expansion of that. The dredging of the harbor in Charlotte Amalie and in St. Croix are all things that we're trying to get the federal government to help us with not only refederalizing our harbors, but giving us the funds needed in order to support that. We remain optimistic that the administration and Congress will support our territorial leadership, not just the Virgin Islands, but all of us. In the Build Back Better plan represents an opportunity to liberate the Virgin Islands from fiscal distress and all of our territories, and build a sustainable local economy that can withstand periodic natural and economic disasters. There's also an opportunity for us to invest in our people. As we recently celebrated our 100th anniversary of being an American territory, you can ensure that we are prepared for the next 100 years, strengthening our infrastructure and eliminating federal policies that undermine our ability to attract investment that would give us a fighting chance to make our second century as Americans even better than the first. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Bryan. Thank you very much for your testimony. I would like to now recognize the chair of the full committee, Chairman Grijalva, for his opening statements. Chairman Grijalva, please.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sablan, and thank you very much for and thank the governors for their time and for putting this hearing together early on in the session. It's important as the Build Back Up plan is being put together and priorities are being set. To have this hearing now is very important, and I think particularly in the last 3 years with your leadership and the leadership of the committee. The issue of the insular areas has grown not only in profile but in some very tangible positive results, and much of the credit, sir, needs to go to you for your leadership on this. The governor of American Samoa said prioritize the issue of healthcare, and he was absolutely correct. And the governor of the Virgin Islands talked about the devastating economic and infrastructure needs that the Virgin Islands have and would translate to the territories, the insular areas in whole. And I agree with that. There's another issue, and as we go forward, creating, I think we within the Build Back Better plan and we within the American Rescue Plan was the idea, the concept of equity and fair treatment and equity for all. And that extends to this discussion today. And I'm very glad we're having it. And the recommendations that the governors are making are very important. We need to do something about SSI. We need to do something about Medicaid. We need to do something for all the territories in order to bring that equity, fairness issue really to light. The other point is that this is the face of American citizens in a region of the world, particularly the Virgin Islands, Marinara Islands, Guam, American Samoa, a face that I think is important for national security, for diplomacy in that region, and the competition in that region, both economically and in other ways. And so I think showing an American face in that region that is prosperous, that is being dealt with equity as American citizens, and are having the resources to take care of their people and to grow their economies and their people, I think is the best diplomacy we can provide for the region as an example of what democracy can do. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that American citizens in our territories are dealt with as American citizens. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you for the hearing, and my special thanks to the governor for taking time.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Grijalva. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to recognize the full committee ranking member, Congressman Westerman, for his opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman Sablan. Good to see you. What
Yes,
is
sir.
again an early morning for you. It's early for some of us, but nothing like what you're the sacrifice you're making to get up in the middle of the night and do a committee hearing. So thank you. And I know several of the governors on the call are also in some different time zones, and it's not quite like us all being back together in Washington, D.C., having these hearings in person, which I really hope we can do that in the near future. I've had the great opportunity to visit all of the territories, beautiful places with wonderful people. And I look forward to when we can get back to doing committee hearings in person again, and also when we can travel back to the territories to do meetings in person there. Today's hearing is about facilitating infrastructure and promoting cleaner energy in a changing climate. We all want a clean environment, but we must achieve it in ways that enhance our competitiveness and security and keep us from mounting additional federal debt. 3 weeks ago, this committee received testimony on a draft bill that would spend millions of taxpayer dollars to create new grant programs and offices to push the insular areas towards the use of renewables and mitigate effects of climate change. At that hearing, I cautioned against a one-size-fits-all approach. Strengthening existing programs and grants available should come before we see an expansion of government. Congress should be providing tools to the insular areas and allowing each of them to make their own decisions on what energy sources they use or want to develop. We can reduce global emissions more efficiently through innovation and the free market than overregulating our domestic resources. We should be building off these successes, not trying to shut down more and more of our domestic supplies. We should also be incentivizing using natural climate solutions, much like what I've proposed in the Trillion Trees Act. The Department of the Interior, through the Office of Insular Affairs, distributes approximately $27 million a year for capital improvement grants. The capital improvement programs help address a variety of infrastructure needs in the U.S. territories, including critical infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, wastewater, and waste systems. Improvements to critical infrastructure not only benefit the current population and businesses, but lay the groundwork to attract new investment in the territories, thereby promoting economic development and self-sufficiency. This funding can also be leveraged as local matching funds for other federal grant programs. I do recognize that the current funding level for these infrastructure grant funds and programs may not be sufficient to address all infrastructure needs in each of the territories. Mr. Sablon talked about hospitals and infrastructure as well as others on the conference this morning. In 2017, I was part of a bipartisan congressional delegation that visited several islands in the South Pacific. I remember being quite shocked to see the state of the Lyndon B. Johnson Tropical Medical Center in American Samoa. The estimated needs of that facility are in excess of $100 million just for modernization, and $750 million for a complete replacement. Now, this is the only hospital on American Samoa, and American Samoa has as high a per capita veteran population of any of the states and territories. And the hospital, my understanding is, doesn't come up to the requirements that the VA requires. So we spend a lot of money doing air ambulance to Hawaii every year. And we should be looking at common sense solutions that would invest that money back in infrastructure so that everybody on the island could have a quality hospital to use that would meet VA standards. And lastly, I would add that a focus for today is more federal spending. Before we start pouring more money into the agencies under this committee's jurisdiction, we should hear from the agencies on exactly how they plan to spend the massive amount of American taxpayer dollars and then implement the new program from the last omnibus appropriations bill. My hope is that we can work together to address each island's priorities in an efficient way that is beneficial to both the taxpayer and the residents that call the U.S. territories their home. I again thank the witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to the questioning since we've already heard the testimonies and the continued dialogue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Westerman. I just like to take note that while the witnesses were testifying, we had with us Congresswoman Grace Napolitano. She chairs the House Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, an important committee under this Build Back Better plan. So thank you. And also, I think will be either as early as next week, we will be having a preview of President Biden's budget. So gives us a small window looking at where the Build Back Better plan is headed. And so now I will open for questioning, and I will start with myself. My governor first. Thank you, Governor. I must acknowledge that you went on time. You spent less than 5 minutes on your testimony. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
But Governor, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words also. But when we talk about sending large amounts of money, federal money to the Northern Marianas and other insular areas, a concern is accountability, sir, making sure the money is used as intended and does not go astray. I have been trying to track the lost wages assistance you were awarded last November. How much were you awarded for lost wages, sir?
I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for that question. I'm not certain to the exact dollars, but I can definitely get that to you as soon as we can in the morning.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I understand that money was transferred to the Commonwealth's account. If I have it correct.
Yes.
Okay. And as that program started, would you know how much of that money has been paid out to unemployed workers in the Marianas?
I'm not sure of the exact dollars on that, but I did. I know that we wanted to push hard now that we got the 100% waiver, but we do intend to actually do that before we got the waiver. But having the 100% waiver is definitely help. CNMI. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I agree. Thank you. Governor, following today's hearing, each committee member will have the opportunity also to ask some additional questions. Responses are expected to be provided in writing. So can we, sir, get your commitment today that you will provide this committee your answers for the record to these and other questions?
Yes, Congressman. I'll be happy to furnish any of my testimony and my response.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. Of course.
Okay, thank you. So by our account, the Northern Marianas is receiving roughly 750 million from the 6 different COVID-19 relief bills enacted into law so far. And we have received another $750 million from FEMA for disaster recovery since 2018. Yes. And this is a lot of money, well over 5 times our Commonwealth government's annual budget. So we certainly want our people to have the resources needed to get through the pandemic and the typhoon disasters and to build back better. But it is difficult to see exactly where all this money is going and whether it is being targeted on to your own strategic goals. So could we please get a proper accounting from you of how your administration has distributed these federal assistance dollars through the Commonwealth, and for what specific purposes, and how that spending matches up to your comprehensive economic development strategy? And we would like your answer to be an official part of the hearing record. Could you give us that overview, Governor Torres, please?
Oh, Congressman, thank you for that question. Going over to a lot of the subsections and even the amount that you mentioned, there's a lot to address and to cover. Definitely, we have to give you a full accountability, and we're happy to do that, as well as the spending plan moving forward. It's going to take probably a couple weeks to be accurate on some of the infrastructures that we need here. I know that your office also is requesting some additional within the other infrastructure questions and concerns, and we want to address that as much as we can and as accurate as we can. But definitely moving forward, not just the recovery that we needed from Typhoon U2 and Mankut, but definitely the CDBG-DR grant, and now with the ACP. And thank you again for all the hard work you've done.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Governor. And I do understand it may take a little bit of time, but if we would just appreciate getting that. Governor, look, both you and I, our testimonies agreed that much of the public infrastructure in our Northern Marianas is outdated, inefficient, and in major need of repair or replacement. Your testimony paints a great picture of the current poor state of our infrastructure. So what would you say are our most pressing needs, and how would you prioritize what should get attention and funding first?
Thank you, Congressman. If you look at, you mentioned about our CUC, our power water distribution. Again, we don't have the potable water here. That alone would see our utility is going to cost $800 million. Our airport needs, again, a new runway, a facility. Our hospital, we only have one hospital with built 1986. We have roughly 86 beds. Not to mention again the systems that Rodentenia needs. We have a lot here that we need to build back, and we really need to push again hard in making sure that we have the right workforce. And having this so much funds, it is a challenge to get construction workers here because, as you know, the FEMA funds that we have to build homes is a challenge in itself. We have to bring construction workers from the U.S. And some of these construction workers, if you look at per wages, it's about $100 to $130 per hour, just because we don't have the workforce that we need here. So the project, even building schools for our public school system, NMC, our road projects, even if you give us, a lot of funds, but our challenges is again making sure that we have the workforce. And thank you for the 3,000 CW workers.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. And yeah, I have other questions, but I agree with you. And we already start looking at the 3,000 workers. And FEMA has also commented that we may need to extend that and open it for other purposes. Thank you, Governor. My time is over. I'd like to now recognize, let me see, Congresswoman Gonzalez Colon, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'll go with my questions now, and that will be to Governor Pierluisi. And we're talking about many issues in infrastructure, and of course, when we were reading the Build Back Better plan so far, I see, and I cannot see any specifically or distinctly proposal for Puerto Rico or the territories in terms of infrastructure. Do we agree that there should be no difference in terms of investment, and the territories should be treated as states in any proposals regarding infrastructure, Governor? I don't know if Governor Pierluisi has on that queue.
Yeah, I can see him, but then wait, hold on. I think he disappeared. Well, could we get the Governor Pierluisi back on, please? Oh, so Congresswoman Gonzalez Colon, do you want to? Can we go on to the next question and then come back
Yes.
right immediately?
Yes, as soon as the governor is available, I'll continue with his questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. You agreed, right?
Sorry?
Oh,
Yeah.
he's coming on now. Here, hold on now. I see that he's coming on. Congressman, yeah.
Gonzalez.
Governor Pierluisi.
Can you listen to me?
Yes. So, Chairman, if the connection of the governor is not good, I can continue to make questions to the rest of the governors until the governor of Puerto Rico can have a better connection.
What's going on?
Okay.
And I hope the time is not discounted.
Yeah. Chairman, can you listen to me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now, Governor.
Can you listen to
Yeah,
me, Chairman?
I'm going to repeat the
Thank you,
question.
member.
I'm going to repeat the question for you. And the question was that
Yes,
we're not,
can you listen to me?
yes, we can.
Okay, Congresswoman.
Yes, the question was, and again, the time is running, Mr. Chairman, I got 2 minutes, 48 seconds left. And without of the technical difficulties, I want to resume my 5 minutes. The question
Right.
was, thank
Your
you.
5 minutes starts
Thank
now.
you, sir. Thank you, sir. Governor, I read the Build Back Better plan of the president, and there's no distinction between how to treat the territories or Puerto Rico in terms of the investment and specifics in infrastructure. Do you believe that territories should be treated as states and with equal participation in any investment in this plan?
Congresswoman, we're gonna have to come back to Governor
Yeah.
Perluisi.
Let's then go to the rest of the governors, and I can submit the questions for the record then. And I
All
will
right.
go with all governors, and we can begin with the Virgin Islands as well. And I know Governor Guerrero is also on the queue. And one of the issues is the Medicaid cliff. And I know many of the territories we've been fighting, and here we got Amata, Flan, Stacy Blaskett is joining us today, as well as many others.
Can the gentleman please suspend for a minute, please?
Yes,
Can you all please mute your microphones unless you are asked to speak? Staff, can you see which microphone is open besides Congresswoman Gonzalez? And turn it and turn it out. Turn it off, please. The gentle lady deserves to be heard. Thank you, Congresswoman Gonzalez. Please proceed.
Chairman, it's just three minutes left again.
That's where you stop. Please continue.
Okay. To the territories, I mean, one of the major issues is going to be the Medicaid funding. In September of this year, it's going to expire the last approval of the incremental in the FMAP. So all territories are going to go back to 55%. And I know we've been working these in different committees, and there are several bills from members of this committee to, attend the situation of thousands of Americans in risk to lose their healthcare program. How this plan will call for additional investment in healthcare. I mean, the ability to deliver services to those people. And I know some of the governors talk about, the need of the medical clinics and how to attend the disparity in Medicaid. Should that be included in this package as well? Governor Guerrero?
Medicaid, of course, is a very necessary and, of course, a priority for us also. And we are, of course, advocating lifting the cap. We are advocating to be treated the same as the other states in terms of calculating. Even more so now that there is federal legislation that allows the FSM, Palau, and RMI, the COFA citizens, to be also eligible for Medicaid. And this will greatly impact also our resources in providing healthcare to everybody. My vision is to have everyone be eligible for Medicaid, as it is less costly and the benefits are, I think, fair. So yes, I think we should, if you can in any way allow the territories to be lifted in their caps, I would go over there personally and kiss you.
I agree with you. I mean, we've been all territories are been fighting with that, and I need to say that Mr. Sablan, Amata, Stacy Plaskett, St. Nicholas, and all the members of the territories have been fighting for this for so long. I'll have another question, and that will be: what policies should Congress adopt in this infrastructure package that can help us modernize our energy systems and the reliance on foreign petroleum imports and address the high electricity rates that hampers economic growth? I think this is an issue that all territories are facing, and not just in the case of Puerto Rico. So can we go with the governor of American Samoa?
So thank you for the question, Honorable Gonzalez. And I think I would like to first thank the other representatives in the full committee this morning, as also Mr. Honorable Bruce Westerman. As you know, American Samoa depends solely on fuel from our island, and we're leaning into more of the solar environment. So in two things, we try to go with the clean environment, as well as we want to depend on ourselves in American Samoa. I would like to also add that if it's okay, Mr. the Honorable Saplan, into the question and leading into what was asked today.
Right. Yeah. If you could also maybe respond to the question in writing, Governor. Ms.
Yes.
Gonzalez has got 10 minutes of her time up, so appreciate it.
Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, but it's a very important question for all of us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Honorable.
Thank
Chairman,
you.
I know that the time expired, so if that question can be answered by all the governors of the territories, it will help us out. I do have a list of other questions specifically for the
Yes.
governor of Puerto Rico, but I will wait for the second round. I yield back.
Okay, second round. Okay, and I'd like to recognize Chairman Grijalva for his questions, if he has any, sir, Mr. Chairman. Something happened to the connection there also. So let me go to and look, like I said earlier, Congresswoman Napolitano was with us. I think she's also gone to other commitment. So is Congressman Gallego online?
I am.
All right. So, sir, you have 5 minutes, Ruben.
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses, especially my good friend, Governor Peter Lisi. Good to see you again. It's been about a month since I've seen you, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you pretty soon again. I'd just like to ask a couple questions, specifically to what the government of Puerto Rico has been able to do with some of the funds that are coming in to prepare for natural disaster recovery. And what are the current plans that you'd like to work with the administration to both be ready for the next natural disaster, and also whatever needs to still recover from the last natural disaster with Hurricane Maria?
Yes, thank you so much, Congressman Gallego. The two main programs obviously applying to Puerto Rico ever since the hurricanes hit the island are the ones coming from FEMA and HUD. On the FEMA front, in the last 2 years, Puerto Rico was basically focused, the government of Puerto Rico, on obligating large spending for large and small projects for permanent work and accelerating emergency work reimbursements. Now, from this year on, what we'll be doing is implementing the permanent work projects that we have in the pipeline. FEMA has already obligated about $24.5 billion due to the Hurricane Maria. But in terms of disbursements, you're talking about $4.3 billion. Those are the ones, $4.3 billion have been disbursed by our Core 3 entity, which is the entity that coordinates all FEMA projects on the island. $5.3 billion are pending to be obligated. On the HUD side of the equation, actually, the two programs, CDBG-DR and CDBG-MIT, involve an allocation of about $20.2 billion for both recovery and mitigation activities. Of those, basically, you have $10 billion assigned to disaster recovery, $8.3 billion assigned for mitigation activities, and $1.9 billion for the grid, reinforcing our electrical grid. But given the special conditions that were imposed by the Trump administration, Puerto Rico only has access at the present time to $3.2 billion of that total allocation of 20.2. I'm working closely with the Biden administration and HUD so that some of these onerous requirements that we were facing in the past, we no longer face. Because both the mitigation and the recovery programs are key for Puerto Rico's future. I should commend the Biden administration because HUD recently basically made available to Puerto Rico $6.2 billion for mitigation projects. And that's good news. On the local front, we're working very closely with mayors, expediting the money that is being assigned to cities throughout Puerto Rico for revitalization purposes. So this is the time for execution. I basically, before assuming office, that's what I promised the people of Puerto Rico, that I would act with a sense of urgency, that we would maximize the use of all this federal funding. So now we will be executing, implementing permanent works, public works in Puerto Rico for the benefit of our people.
Thank you, Governor. And just with the little amount of time I left, how much more different would it be if you were a state versus a territory trying to get all of this done? Oh, did I lose him? Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Mr. Chairman, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Governor, did you hear my question?
Please pose it once again.
Just how much more different would this be if Puerto Rico was a state versus a territory trying to get this done?
Oh, well, the difference is that we have a great resident commissioner on the Hill, but as you all know, she doesn't have a vote on the floor of the House, and she's only one. We have no representation in the Senate. It's just commonsensical that if you had two senators and 4 representatives in the House batting for Puerto Rico, we wouldn't have faced all these onerous requirements we have faced. I mean, as we speak, we had a monitor for our local housing department, and there was no justification for having a monitor there. Actually, the only case of corruption involving the use of federal funds due to the hurricanes we got is a federal case. It involves FEMA officials, FEMA contractors. So in the past administration, there was all this talk about corruption to justify different requirements on Puerto Rico, and there's no basis for that. I have zero tolerance for corruption. We will be using this funding in accordance with federal requirements, but we should be having the same treatment that the states have.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate it. Thank you. The gentleman's time is up. I'd like to now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Congressman Westerman, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Sablon, and thank you again to the witnesses. And I just want to reiterate again how happy I'll be when we get away from these virtual hearings. For some reason, I can't get the timer to show up on my computer this morning, so I've got my I've got my own timer running here. I hope it tracks closely with yours, and it's really hard to follow the testimonies and the questions, and I think it just takes away from the work of the committee. And personally, it's embarrassing to me that the greatest country on earth is running our business this way. So I really encourage us all to work together to get back to in-person hearings in DC. And I want to pick up where I left off a little bit on my opening statement with Governor Magua from American Samoa. Do you have any information or data on how much the VA is spending to send veterans to Hawaii?
I know I don't have the data on the VAs, but I know the local population with our sending patients to Off Island from American Samoa to Hawaii and New Zealand and so forth. We spend about $2 million and up in a year, but I don't have the information on the veterans as you asked, Congressman.
So I know if you're a veteran on American Samoa and you need medical care, the VA pays for those travel expenses. But what about if you're not a veteran and you need services that can't be provided at the local hospital? How do you cover those costs on the transportation?
The cost for us in Medicaid is only we refer only those that are qualified, which are American Samoa national citizens of the U.S. The major half of the population are non-U.S. citizens, non-American Samoan nationals, and we are locally billed for that effort in helping those part of the population. And mainly, most of them, we don't get referral filing for medical, but we try to treat them here on island, which, as you are aware of, Honorable, that our hospital is one of the most critical infrastructure that we are planning to ask the federal for help in terms of building a new one. We would like to depend on ourselves here on island rather than referring patients off island, and we would like to help with the veterans as well to support that population here in American Samoa.
Yeah, it just seems like common sense to me that we would spend the money more smarter to fix a hospital that would serve all the needs of American Samoa. And I visited the Virgin Islands right before the pandemic hit, and we were in a hospital there that had been damaged in the hurricane. There was the top floor, maybe the top 2 floors of the hospital were not usable because of mold. And Governor Bryan, are you experiencing the same thing where it's the VA is spending a lot of money to airlift patients where maybe some of that money could be spent to build better facilities on the island?
And that is correct too. And we have a high per capita veterans and people who have served in the armed forces. Currently, we even use local money to subsidize trips over to Puerto Rico in order to assist our veterans. So we would love more services here. We're trying to incorporate some of the clinical services that they use into our healthcare system, maybe using services and resources of the new hospitals when those get built. But up to now, we still haven't finished our temporary hospital, and we're struggling to finish the FEMA negotiations for our permanent ones.
And I think I've got just a little bit of time left. Governor Bryan, if the Virgin Islands were required to rely solely on renewable resources, how would that impact the island from an energy standpoint? And do you support the use of reliable liquefied natural gas?
As a matter of fact, it would revolutionize what we're doing, not only from a standpoint of lowering the poverty rate. Currently, our electrical rate's about 5 times that of an average American. And we have been into conversation with several natural gas providers, trying to create a strategic position for the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean for smaller islands to be able to use LNG and convert ours as well to LNG and help that energy crisis, which would create jobs and allow us to attract a lot more manufacturing to our shores.
Yeah, it
Thank
seems like
you.
an obvious solution to me. I guess my time's expired, Chairman. My clock's showing it
Thank you,
has, so
Mr. Westerman.
I'll yield back. Thank you.
Your clock is correct, Mr. Westerman. Thank you very much. Let me see. Is Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez still with us? I know she was earlier. We have a markup on another committee, so we need to keep moving. Congressman Soto, please. You've been patient. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for this opportunity. You know, these internet connection problems are just further evidence of the lack of infrastructure in our territories. And it's a call to this committee to make sure that they are part of the infrastructure Build Back Better plan, particularly broadband and internet connections throughout our territories, so that we don't have governors in the United States having to have all these issues that we're having already. So that in itself evidences the need for the Build Back Better plan. You know, the American Rescue Act had record funding for our territories, $4.5 billion in territorial government relief, $50 million for Puerto Rico homeowners, as well as a similar amount for rental assistance. And we've extended the child tax credit in earnest to our territories with this increase. We're getting in the right direction with regard to treating our territories more equally to states, but there's no way that's a full substitute. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the suffering that's gone on in my family's native island of Puerto Rico with economic recession, with 2 major hurricanes, with earthquakes, with the PROMESA budget cuts, and also now the coronavirus pandemic. And we know because of this that the territorial status is a failure for them. It's just too big of a territory with too many people. They'd be as large as 26 or 25 other states or larger. And so we know in November they voted clearly for statehood with nearly 53%. I appreciate all the folks on the committee who supported this. It's all about making sure that we could get beyond this failed territorial status. And I encourage both Chair Grijalva and Chair Sablan and others to host a hearing finally on status so that we can start hearing these bills in earnest. Governor Perluisi, what are key provisions included in the American Rescue Plan that you would like to see sustained or expanded? And are there sectors of Puerto Rico's economic or infrastructural development that the American Rescue Plan does not cover that would require investment from Congress moving forward?
Thank you, Congressman Darren Soto. You've been a great friend to Puerto Rico. I know you have lots of constituents coming from Puerto Rico. And we have, as I said before, a great resident commissioner, but we see you as another member of Congress batting for us, and I thank you. Now, the American Rescue Plan did very well for the territories, for all of them. It corrected, in the case of Puerto Rico, the lack of inclusion. We face total inclusion in the child tax credit program. Now we will be fully included, and that's appreciated. The federal government will be now funding about 75% of a local robust earned income tax credit program, which is key. That's the best anti-poverty program in the States. And it provided additional nutrition assistance to Puerto Rico, but we are not yet treated like a state in the SNAP program. So that's one that I'm going to flag right now to you. We should be treated the same for nutrition purposes. It would be roughly about $1 billion more for the nutrition of our needy. And they are all American citizens. SSI is another program, the Supplemental Security Income Program, where Puerto Rico is not treated the same. And it makes no sense. People with disabilities, elderly, low income, elderly with disabilities, they should have access to that program. Unfortunately, the First Circuit Court of Appeals made a decision basically saying that we should be eligible, meaning residents of Puerto Rico, to receive SSI benefits, because that program has nothing to do with whether you pay taxes or not. It has to do with whether you do have disabilities or not. And when American citizens are not treated the same and they live in Puerto Rico, what ends up happening is that they hop on a plane and move to your district, to Florida, or they move to Texas or the Carolinas, and that doesn't help anybody. So that's why we should be treated like a state. And definitely there are areas in which the American Rescue Plan has not yet dealt with. So I will continue working with you, Congressman Darren Soto, and all members of Congress who get the fact that we are American citizens and should be treated equally.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Governor. Thank you, Congressman Soto. Let me, hold on. Look, I don't make this lineup, okay? Staff give me the lineup, so please don't hold it against me. Let me see. Up next is Mr. Lamborn. Is Mr. Lamborn was supposed to call in? Is he in? Going once, going twice. Congresswoman Wagon, please, you have 5 minutes. Thank you for being so patient.
Talofa lava. Good morning. Thank you, Vice Chairman Sablan, Ranking Member Gonzalez Colon, Full Committee Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Westerman for holding this hearing. I want to also especially thank the Governor of American Samoa, the Honorable Emanu P.S. Monga, for his leadership to our people. And to the governors, thank you all so very much for taking time to testify today as we investigate ways to best address key issues of the territories. I would like to build on the Honorable Governor Emanu's testimony. Governor, a study was conducted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the LBJ Tropical Medical Center. It presented multiple options and costs, from a minimum of $160 million for modernization to $300 million for a new similar-sized hospital, and over $500 million plus for total new state-of-the-art, fully Medicaid compliant facility. Governor, can you provide any guidance to the committee on the best way to either remediate or replace LBJ Hospital and share some of the hospital's current challenges, please?
Thank you, Congresswoman Wifatali, for the question this morning. And the study was conducted by the Corps of Engineers. In fact, it was a mandate from Congress to conduct a study of our hospital in American Samoa. And the three options were given. And as the governor and the leadership of American Samoa, leaning more into a new hospital versus the renovation of the current hospital with a new location. The new hospital that's going to cost, according to the assessment by the Corps of Engineers, it's going to cost $700+ million. And the reason why I said that is because American Samoa is so isolated from mainland. And as was mentioned earlier by the Honorable Westerman, if we could do the new hospital, we wouldn't have to refer all the veterans off island, all the patients that we need to send to different locations just to get a treatment of rather than American Samoa. So, Congresswoman, as we mentioned, and we have discussed in the American Samoa going forward, the hospital as part of the of our priorities in American Samoa is the healthcare of our people. As I mentioned, the lack of healthcare in American Samoa, we spend a lot of money sending our people off island and not here in American Samoa. And a question, Congresswoman, and I thank the other governors for addressing the need of the islands that is similar to American Samoa. The approach going forward is, to my view as we go forward, it has to be a holistic approach, meaning we can't just fix one aspect of our government. We have to simultaneously do different effort going forward, meaning we can do the hospital if we don't address the critical needs of the other areas of the government. Then we're going to still pull back as we go forward, meaning if we're going to address the hospital, we need to address transportation amongst the islands, because that connects the main island of American Samoa and the other islands, meaning boats, airplanes, and air transportation and sea transportation, as well as addressing the infrastructures, meaning the wharves, the seashores, that is erosion real fast from the hurricane, high sea rises, and the many other aspects of as an islander versus the state. A good point was brought up by one of the governors this address today is the federal government restrictions in terms of utilizing funds that was given to the territory, and to adjust. And we need, as governors of territories, and from your end as the Congress, to adjust and make decisions on priorities within our territories. Give us that leadway. Obviously, as dollars approved are more so to the priorities mainly of the states of the U.S., but probably 2% or maybe 5% are towards the territories consideration. Federal restrictions and process stop is just killing the end users from building our economy, protecting our lives and property. This, if we work together, will benefit our people. And of course, the end users don't have to return the dollars back to where it came from. And we then fail as leaders, to provide for our people. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Reddy Wagon. Let me see again. Congressman San Nicolas, please, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by recognizing the fact that we're having this hearing in advance of the next phase of the Biden administration's proposals to build back better. But the fact that we're bringing territories to the table at the beginning rather than territories trying to scramble at the middle or at the end is a testament to the president's commitment in his inaugural address to include states, tribes, and territories in being able to move forward policy for the benefit of the country. I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, a disturbing observation that I've had in multiple hearings. And this observation is the fact that, I would listen to remarks being made, and they'll go something like this. They'll open up with, "I'm so glad our territories are here. I'm so glad our territories are participating." And then they'll go on to say, "But program X or program Y or program Z has problem A or problem B or problem C with it." And so it'll conclude with, "I don't know if I can support territories being able to have parity in program X, Y, or Z because of my problems in A, B, and C." And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to bring that up in this hearing because this committee has oversight over our territories and it has oversight over our tribes. And those kind of remarks, when I hear them in various conversations, not limited to these, they basically make me feel like the territories are being held hostage to the problems that some may have with certain programs, and they're using their concerns with those programs to ultimately deny parity to our territories. And that's very problematic for me. Because what we're asking for, and everything that's been said so far in this hearing, and in everything that I've heard in every other hearing when we're discussing things like Medicaid or SSI or transportation infrastructure or COVID-19 relief, all I'm hearing is a quest for parity. All of our territories are only asking to be treated equal. I never hear anybody make a remark that they have a problem with Medicaid and then turn around and volunteer their district to be denied Medicaid until the greater problem of Medicaid is resolved. I never hear anybody say they want to all of a sudden cut themselves off from SSI until the greater problem of SSI is resolved. I never hear anyone say they want to deny their own district stimulus or PUA or any kind of COVID-19 relief until the overall COVID-19 relief package is resolved. All of a sudden, when it comes to individual jurisdictions, there isn't a willingness to make them be a sacrificial lamb. But when it comes to territories and in these kind of conversations, when it comes to tribes and those kind of conversations, all of a sudden, program integrity becomes a big question and extending parity to us becomes a big problem. And that needs to stop. And I wanted to put that on the record in this hearing, Mr. Chairman, because as oversight over tribes and territories, I think that this is where that standard needs to begin being set, and that's where this message needs to begin being communicated. And with that, I'm very, very grateful that we have this hearing. I'm very grateful for the Biden administration taking the steps necessary to take all of us to a higher level of parity. And I wanted to extend my deepest respect to my fellow colleagues who are not from territories, who are making the time to be here for us today. I wanted to extend my deepest respect to my Pacific territorial colleagues who are here at on our end, clearly it's 1:45 in the morning. My Governor Leon Guerrero, thank you so much, Governor Torres, thank you so much. And with that, Governor, I only have a minute left, Governor Leon Guerrero, but let me yield the balance of my time to any other remarks you would like to add, please. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I wanted to also add about treatment of the compact impact funds. As you know, there's been an agreement with our islands, and we have now unrestricted travel and unrestricted movement of COFA to our islands. It has totally impacted our infrastructure and our social services. We love our neighbors. We want to provide what we can, but we can't do it without Congress recognizing the greatest impact on our island and to be able to provide us the federal resources to make sure that we are also able to take care of our COFA brothers and sisters. So there is a debt and Congress needs to pay up. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Guerrero. You should know that Congressman Case is here with us today and is one of the biggest proponent of the continuation of the compact negotiation for the Federated States of Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and next year Palau, that it must continue. We're going to try and get a hearing on that soon. But for now, I understand Congressman Lamborn is supposed to call in. I don't see him, but he may be in the room through the phone. Congressman Lamborn, you recognize for 5 minutes, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, I cannot see you, but yes, I hear you.
Yes, and I had
And
to
now
call in. Thank you.
Everybody has your phone number now.
Yeah, I had to call in by phone because I'm traveling. So this is the only way I can participate. So thank you so much. And I have a couple of questions for Governor Pierluisi, whom I served with when he was in Congress. But first, let me just make one comment about the possibility of a infrastructure package with the Biden administration. I hope it's more bipartisan than the $1.9 trillion relief package, which received no bipartisan support whatsoever in the House or Senate. only 9% of that package was actually spent for COVID or public health. And some of that money is to be spent years and years into the future and doesn't go to immediate relief. So I hope we can do a much better job on an infrastructure package and make it truly bipartisan. Governor Pierluisi, I want to ask you about electricity in Puerto Rico. And by the way, I look forward to our meeting next Tuesday. I'm going to be seeing you, and I look forward to that. But when it comes to electricity generation, Puerto Rico has traditionally been constrained by having to use heating oil. Heating oil is very expensive and dirty. And something like liquefied natural gas would be, I think, the ideal solution. It's cheaper, it's cleaner. Now, there are those who say, oh, don't ever use natural gas, just go to solar and wind. And I'm afraid if we wait for that day to come, Puerto Rico will never catch up when it comes to modern electricity generation. What are your thoughts, Mr. Governor, about electricity generation in Puerto Rico, and what are you doing?
Yes, it's great to hear you, Congressman Lamburn, and your question is well taken. Actually, we're in the midst of a transformation of our energy sector in Puerto Rico. We have quite an ambitious renewable energy portfolio requirement in our law. By year 2025, 40% of our energy must come from renewable sources as opposed to fossil fuel. But I agree with you. LNG is the cleanest and actually cheapest source of energy for Puerto Rico other than renewable energy. And LNG can be a transition source of energy while we move on to renewables. We are currently relying on LNG to produce some of our energy. But more plants, one or more oil burning plants in Puerto Rico to LNG. So count on that. We're moving forward. We have a P3 in the process to take over the transmission and distribution of.
Okay, we have.
Yeah, we lost them.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Lambert, we can hear you. We just seem to have lost Governor Pierluisi again.
Okay, well, I agree with the ranking member. We need to do these in person as soon as we can. But in the meantime, let me just say to the governor, I want to see Puerto Rico as prosperous and thriving as possible. And there are going to be some environmentalists who say, oh, don't even have natural gas because their dream is all renewable. And yet that day has not yet arrived where that's a practical solution with an island of 3 million people. So I want to see Puerto Rico as entertain LNG for as many people as possible, and that's much better than heating oil. So with that in mind, thank you for your response. I look forward to seeing you soon, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. At this time, I'd like to recognize he's been very patient, Congressman Garcia. Please, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and ranking members, and of course to all the governors of the territories. In the last few years, the people of Puerto Rico have faced hurricanes, earthquakes, and now a pandemic. And in the midst of it all, the residents of the island have also had to deal with the privatization of the Power Electric Authority. We all understand that it is imperative for Puerto Rico's power system to get back on track. President Biden has called for strengthening and modernizing the power system, recognizing that it is critical to Puerto Rico's long-term development. Just a few months ago, this committee held a hearing to examine Prepa's rebuilding status, transition to renewable energy, and privatization activities, including its new agreement with the Luma energy company. One thing was made clear from the meetings, from the hearings, that this privatization and long-term concession of its power generation, distribution, and transmission systems must occur in full transparency. However, we know this has not always been the case. Billions of dollars in contracts have been awarded to the politically connected without full transparency, even as Puerto Ricans suffer electricity outages. So I hope the Governor Pierluisi is back on the line. Are you, Governor?
Yes, I am. I listen to you loud.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. So my questions are, Luma Energy
you as well
has indicated its interest in subcontracting federally funded grid reconstruction projects to its corporate affiliates, none of whom are based in Puerto Rico. What actions does your government, your newly elected government, I should reiterate, intend to take to ensure that the economic benefits and contracting opportunities associated with the use of federal funds benefit the local economy to the maximum extent possible?
Okay, so I assumed office 2.5 months ago. The P3, the public-private partnership contract, entered into by the Public-Private Partnership Authority of the Government of Puerto Rico, the Power Authority of Puerto Rico, and approved by both the oversight board we have in Puerto Rico and the Energy Bureau we have in Puerto Rico, was already in place when I came into office. Mm-hmm. What I did, given the concerns that were raised by some, if not many, was I created a steering committee chaired by the Secretary of State of Puerto Rico, Lieutenant Governor of Puerto Rico, and all the key players in the government to make sure that we do oversight over Luma, the P3 authority, and that the transition that is going on flows. This P3 only involves transmission and distribution of energy in Puerto Rico. Private generation or generation is a different conversation. According to the contract, they're supposed to take over that part of our energy sector or Prepa's business, the Power Authority's business, as of July 1st. Our legislature is doing oversight. But I understand of law and order. I inherited this contract, and actually it binds my administration. But I will be keeping an eye on this. You mentioned contracts. The federal our grid is going to be done with federal funding. And there are strict requirements in terms of the procurement process that needs to happen before the rebuilding takes place. So we will ensure that those federal requirements are complied with. If Luma wants to have any of its affiliates doing part of that rebuilding, they need to comply with all federal requirements.
Thank you, Governor. I have 3 more questions. I don't think I'm going to get them all in, but are you open to the idea of requiring Prepa to contract with an independent private sector inspector general to monitor operations, implement reforms, and report violations of law or regulations to enforcement agencies? Yes or no? Por favor.
Looks like we lost.
Is to do all necessary oversight over the P3 will be done. All necessary oversight, either through the P3 authority or through Prepa, regardless.
All right, thank you, Congressman Garcia. You may have to submit your other questions in writing, sir.
I will. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for your patience. I now would like to recognize, let me see, Congressman Fulcher, or this, I don't see him online. Oh, yeah. Mr. Fulcher, you have 5 minutes, sir. Hello? All right. Let me recognize then, Mr. Tiffany. You have 5 minutes, sir. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to echo what our ranking member said, Mr. Westerman, in regards to these hearings and the glitches that we're having with the technology. It is time to get back in the hearing rooms and for us to be able to communicate with each other in the greatest deliberative body ever invented in mankind's history, the Congress of the United States. This is not how it should operate. And I know, Mr. Sablan, this is not your fault, but it's very disappointing. I want to address my question to Governor Pierluisi from Puerto Rico, and I want to work off from comments and questions Representative Gallego put forth in regards to infrastructure. A few years ago, after Hurricane Maria, Wisconsin workers came to Puerto Rico, in particular, people technically skilled in putting up electrical lines, installing them. They spent a month or two down there and really helped Puerto Rico get back up on its feet. And my neighbors, some of them were involved with that, and they were very happy to do it and to be able to help Puerto Rico through a tough spot after Hurricane Maria. However, there are also some of my constituents in my district in northern Wisconsin that went to Puerto Rico, and they helped the massive cleanup of trees and debris and things like that, and they still have not been paid. They are owed millions of dollars. And Governor Pierluisi, you talked about accelerating reimbursements, and there's $5.3 billion that is pending. Will these contractors be paid? Because I can tell you, I have local constituents who are facing bankruptcy as a result of not being paid for the work they did in coming down to Puerto Rico to help clean up the island after Hurricane Maria. Governor Pierluisi.
I think we're having connection problems again with the governor, Mr. Tiffany.
Okay. Then let me, Mr. Chairman, I really do want an answer to this question because I have constituents who are, they are on the brink of bankruptcy as a result of not being compensated for the work they did in Puerto Rico. They went the extra mile to go about helping clean up what was the devastation after Hurricane Maria. And it is so disappointing that these people have not been paid as a result of that. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address the question to Governor Torres of the CNMI. And so I want to thank Governor Torres for being here. There's growing concern about efforts by the Chinese government to pour money into the CNMI and other Pacific Islands under the guise of improving infrastructure or expanding tourism. And I want to ask you specifically about that. Over the last decade, citizens of the People's Republic of China have sidestepped the visa requirements that apply to the rest of the United States entering CNMI through something called parole. This has resulted in a massive spike in so-called birth tourism. In fact, the number of babies delivered in the CNMI to foreign nationals has skyrocketed from less than 10 a decade ago to some 600 in 2018, with about 95% of those being People's Republic of China nationals. In fact, the number of babies born to foreign citizens on Saipan in recent years has exceeded those to legal U.S. residents. Do you think fueling Chinese birth tourism is an appropriate use of the parole designation, and do you think that policy makes sense for the United States? Governor Torres.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, I do not promote birth tourism here, and that is something that I've always against. If you look at the U.S. immigration, since they took over with federalization, that has skyrocketed the birth tourism. But it is important to have the visa waiver for our tourism here in the CNMI, but not birth tourism. And I don't agree on accepting or allowing birth tourism on the CNMI.
Just one follow-up, Governor Torres. Thank you very much for that answer. Has the government of the CNMI ever formally asked Communist China to be included in the Guam CNMI visa waiver program, which allows the territories to operate under a different set of immigration rules than the rest of the United States? If such a request was made, when was it made, and what was the answer from the Department of Health Services?
Congressman, thank you for that question. I believe we did made those requests and conversation through our 902 conversation, which is the covenant, um, and so we have made those requests in terms of that conversation through 902 conversation.
Governor, would you mind formally giving my office an answer in regards to this? And if you would send that to us, and perhaps what we could do is, I have the question here with me. We could forward it to you, and if you could give us a formal answer, that would really be appreciated if you do not mind.
Sure. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having your office and my office get to that question, and I will get a response immediately.
Thank you very much, Governor Torres. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, do we have the Puerto Rican governor back?
No, actually not. No, just he's not on.
Please
Hello?
hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me, Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Tiffany is way over his time, so could you submit your question to the Governor Pierluisi and expect him to answer that in writing? Mr. Tiffany?
Okay, Governor Pierluisi, could you and I do a private phone call sometime, and so that I could pose my question to you and we could talk about this offline? Is that okay with you?
That's okay with me. It's important to know who engaged your constituent, whether it was FEMA directly or a municipality or other instrumentality, but I'll take care of it. We'll talk over the phone.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I yield back.
And Mr. Tiffany, also, I'd like to engage with you also on a one-to-one on your question to Governor Torres, because I can testify that he's done much to stop birth tourism as well, and I don't like that program as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Sablan. We will communicate with you also.
Okay, and so now may I recognize Mr. Case, who's been outstanding and very patient. Mr. Case, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair, and good morning and aloha to each and all of our guests and to my fellow colleagues. Of course, in Hawaii, we have a very, very long history of working very, very closely with each and all of you. We share so much, and we have so many common interests and concerns that arise from our particular characteristics, not the least of which is dealing with being islands out in the middle of the ocean. I especially appreciate my colleagues here in Congress that I've been able to work very closely with, Vice Chair Sablan, Ms. Gonzalez-Colon, Mr. San Nicolas, Mrs. Radewagen, and Ms. Plaskett. It's great to partner with you all over again. Let me ask you this. This hearing is about infrastructure for the territories, and it strikes me, and I think Governor Torres, you spoke to this, or actually Mr. Sablan did. There's a lot of money out there from the recovery plans going out throughout our country. That's good. In my view, and we are about to make a major investment in infrastructure, which each and all of you have spoken to critical concerns. I agree with the critical concern with healthcare in American Samoa. So much critical healthcare concern. I especially agree with the comments of some of you on climate change, especially as to coastal resilience, which we very much share that concern. Here in Hawaii, and would like to help out and work collectively however we can. But it strikes me that, especially in an insular environment, the amount of money going in a very short period of time, Vice Chair Sablan said 5 times the annual budget of the Northern Marianas going in a very short period of time can really, really distort local market conditions, especially on construction costs. We have already we already know that we have some of the highest construction costs in the entire country because of having to ship in so much and lack of critical mass in many cases in our local workforces in both the Northern Marianas and in Guam. You have addressed that in very specific areas in Guam as to our defense contracting through adjustments to immigration to allow for temporary workers from elsewhere. Is this something that should be part of the infrastructure plan, a more broad-based adjustment as to the workforce with which to deliver the infrastructure needs? Because I fear that at least in some of your jurisdictions, and in mine for that matter, the escalation in cost of a project because of a very, very limited labor supply for the amount of building going on is going to be astronomical, and is really going to dry up the efficiency of the funds. And so I don't know, very quickly, if I could just kind of ask that question, Governor Torres, I assume that this would still remain a major issue for you.
Yes, Congressman Casey, thank you very much. I'll just give an example for the recovery for our Super Typhoon U2. What would normally cost $100,000 house is now $350,000 house. And again, those are numbers coming from FEMA. One bedroom is an average of about $180,000. Two bedrooms about $250,000, $460,000, and then the 3-bedroom is $350,000. When again, normally it would have costed $100,000, $250,000, and that's just one project.
Understood. And then Governor Guerrero, as to Guam, would you like some kind of an expansion in the infrastructure bill that is currently being made available to our military as to folks coming in to help out with construction, given a very limited local labor force?
Absolutely. And I know that when the Philippines was taken off the approved list, that really impacted our labor force, and our H-2B workers went from 3,000 to 0, and it did impact the cost. I certainly also share the expense that Governor Torres had just enumerated to you. But if there's any way that we can make it a little bit easier for H-2 workers to come in, foreign laborers, that would really, I think, help our expenses. But the other thing is, we are also working very hard to do apprenticeship programs, to do trades academies, to do vocational, because we see the foreign workers not as the main reason or solution. We would rather have our own local people trained to do the labor.
Okay, Vice Chair, my time is up, but I would respectfully request an answer from the remaining governors on that. I would think that the challenge is similar with American Samoa, and Governor Bryan, I don't know enough about the Virgin Islands to know whether you have that issue. Puerto Rico is I would guess a little different just in terms of the number of folks there, but I will defer back to you and ask for a response.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Case. And let me see, Mr. Abernathy is next. I think he's also just calling in.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm
Congressman?
here.
Oh, okay, yeah, sir, thank you for your patience. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all of our panelists. It's been a very interesting hearing. My question is for Governor Guerrero. You mentioned briefly in your testimony the difficulty of getting Guam residents qualified under SSI. And I understand that there's been some promising legal developments recently. I wonder if you could bring us up to speed on that and tell us what you think the long solution to that is going to be.
I'm not that familiar with the case, but I think the solution is to include territories in the SSI programs. CNMI is included in it, and so I just don't understand why the other territories cannot be included in the SSI program. And it would really help our island in terms of benefits to our disability individuals. So I'm not up to speed with the case, but I do know that the courts did say that we should be included in the SSI.
Right. Yeah, I think it was one resident that they ruled on that, but it does set an interesting legal precedent. And so hopefully maybe that'll open the door towards resolving that status for all of the territories. And Mr. Chairman, I understand the Representative Gonzalez Colon had some other questions. I'd like to yield the balance of my time to her.
All right, Congresswoman Colon, you have 3 minutes and 36 seconds. Jennifer?
Thank you, Congressman, for yielding. I really, yeah, I'm here, sir. Thank you, Congressman, for yielding. I really appreciate that. I don't know if the governor of Puerto Rico is back online.
I am.
Good. My question, and we were making some question before, but now I need to make an important question in terms of how crucial it is for Puerto Rico that we address the upcoming Medicaid cliff in September of this year. What will be the consequences for Puerto Rico if we don't solve that situation?
Is about the Medicaid in Puerto Rico, and I have to say the following. It is absolutely essential that Congress provide permanent Medicaid financing to Puerto Rico. Ever since 2018, Congress has been providing funds for Puerto Rico for a year, 2 years, and every year or every other year, we face what we call a fiscal cliff, which is, let me explain it in plain vanilla. The cost of our Medicaid program, which is not a full Medicaid program, it amounts to about $2.8 billion a year. The only permanent funding we have amounts to $400 million a year. So imagine, Puerto Rico would have to cover $2.4 billion for purposes of providing adequate medical services to the medically indigent on our island. That is unacceptable. We are part of the U.S. We are a territory of the United States. We are American citizens. And when you cannot provide adequate health care to your people, what they do, and you cannot complain or blame them, is they hop on a plane, they move to Florida, they move to Texas, they move to the Carolinas, what have you. That's not good for anybody, because we don't want to continue losing population. So we definitely need Congress to intervene and provide us permanent funding for our Medicaid program, which at a minimum would allow us to cover all those who fall under federal poverty levels. At least we should be given parity at that level. I know you, Resident Commissioner, have been fighting hard so that Congress does the right thing. And I urge all members of this committee to side with us, because this is the right thing to do. As I have said before, and when we talk about the territories at large, when you look at the U.S. Constitution, it talks about territories or possessions. Well, if you own a territory or you possess a territory, that comes with an obligation, with a responsibility. And if the territory is populated by American citizens on top of it, you should be then ensuring that the American citizens who reside in that territory or possession.
Okay, Pedro's offline again, Congresswoman Gonzalez.
I yield back. I yield back, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So let me see. Miss McCollum. Miss McCollum, going once, twice. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen, going once, twice. Mr. Lip, are you still on? Okay, Miss Porter, I did see Katie earlier, but I don't know if she's still with us. Wow, this has been a difficult hearing. Some of the technical aspects of it also, but look, I want to thank the witnesses for their great and valuable testimony, and the members, of course, for their good questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to this in writing under Committee Rule 3.0. Members of the committee may submit witness questions within 3 days following the hearing, and the hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for this response. Again, thank you everyone for being here. I want to.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Mr. Chairman, yes, just because before closing, I think the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Westerman, did a right point. These remote hearings are being difficult, not just for the witnesses, but for the members as well. And we encourage the committee to do these hearings at the hearing room, like we are doing right now, next to this computer in the transportation and infrastructure. They're doing a hearing markup. We're connected. Members can be on the floor. So I just encourage you, Chairman, to consider this in order to have good work in this committee. And I yield back.
I hear you, Jennifer. That's above my pay grade, as you all know. And we will continue to have hearings even if we cannot have them in the committee room. But these hearings are important, and getting the governors to get up and travel to DC at this time where it's risky also, it will be addressed at the appropriate time, of course, based on what the attending physician says and what the sergeant at arms says. So I don't disagree with you, Jennifer. I don't disagree with ranking member Westerman, but for this hearing, if there's no further business, without objection, the committee will stand adjourned.